welcome to the Capital Film Podcast. I'm here with the host, Mr. Katt.
You're damn right, I'm the host, and I'm here with my co-host,
Mr. Gurl.
Yeah, and today we are doing...
Sometime back, we decided to create a top 20 list. If you didn't see last episode, we decided to do a revisions and make it a top 50 list. But, previously, back when it was a top 20 list, when we had different movies on there, I decided to take all the movies from the original top 20 and decided to go, okay, I'm curious, let's run this through an algorithm and see what the algorithm recommends for our movies. Now, we got recommended a couple of different movies, and we decided to eliminate 8 movies that we had already seen. And so that way each of us were recommended a movie that the person that is being recommended to didn't see. In which case, in terms of the host here, you got recommended
Grave of the Fireflies, a Studio Ghibli movie.
And I got recommended The Elephant Man by David Lynch.
What do you know? A controversial director turns into you.
We're going to talk about that soon.
So yeah, we got recommended 2 movies. Oddly enough, I was the only one with the animated movie. I'm making fun.
Were you expecting me to be recommended an animated movie?
No, I'm talking about the frog.
Yeah, I know. I saw the comment. Did you see my response?
Yeah, I saw the yes, I saw it, and I just thought, jeez. It's actually kind of funny. I actually laughed. But anyway, yes. So, which movie do you want to talk about first?
So, in which case, I believe of the ordering, we watched mine first, then yours.
I think that's right.
So, do you want to do that in that order, or do you want to do it the opposite way?
I really don't care.
Alright, I guess we can, since you're the host, we'll start with you.
Oh, dear Lord. Okay, everybody, so... Alright, so... How much do you know about Grave of the Fireflies, Bryce?
So we watched it. I didn't do any research before or afterwards. I just know historical context that I just know from existing.
I know only one thing about it. So this movie was released as a double feature.
Oh, yes, you told me about this.
Yes. So if you don't know what a double feature is, back in the day, they used to have a system to where a studio might possibly make 2 movies and they'll release it on the exact same night, back to back.
Yes.
So, in this case, Grave of the Fireflies, I believe it was either the first or the last, I don't know which one it was, but weirdly enough, the movie that it released with it was My Neighbor Totoro. A very iconic movie for Studio Ghibli.
Yes.
And
probably their most iconic.
Yes, and if you know anything about both of these movies, very tonally different.
Yes.
Very, very tonally different. So, we'll get into that whole spiel about Grave of the Fireflies. However, there's only one thing that's different about these 2 movies besides the whole tonal thing, is they're directed by 2 different people. Hayao Miyazaki for Totoro, and then Grave of the Fireflies with Isao Takahata. I believe Miyazaki's closest friends in the animation field, if I remember right. I don't know. He made a few movies. I've only seen like 2 other ones. His last one was, I think, the one I saw. Passed away in 2018. But, so how do you start off with Grave of the Fireflies? Let's start off with a small synopsis.
Yes.
Bryce,
So, Grave of the Fireflies, that is giving a non-spoiler thing, because I do want to start off with a non-spoiler section, so we can get your recommendations out there. In which case, what you will really need to know about this movie going in is that this is going to be based in Imperial Japan during the Second World War. And is basically following an older brother and his younger sister.
Yes.
That is the most you really need to know about going into this movie. It is built off a very sad premise. I believe it's also based off of... Was it a book or event? I know it's like loosely based off a lot of stuff.
So, from what I understand, the story is based off of semi-true events, like, at least as far as I know. This was based off of a short story of how the author was literally writing a story apologizing for not saving his younger sister in this whole thing of the end of the World War II. This is where it all takes place in. We are seeing the fire bombings of, say, Tokyo. We are seeing everything. Pretty much it's just not a good time to be living in Japan during this whole thing. But it will... this whole story is just about an older brother and his sister. Their parents are gone, and they are tasked with surviving in World War II at the very tail end, where fire bombings and a bunch of destruction is happening. and chaos.
Yes.
So we do get a whole glimpse of what being a normal being in a normal setting of Japanese life was like at the end of World War II.
For the most part.
For the most part. I mean, they don't show the atomic bombings at all. I mean, that is a small spoiler, but not really, I guess.
Yeah. In which case, just to quickly get down with some of the non-spoiler stuff, what I feel, if you're on the fence about watching this movie, the pitch of the idea of, because this is a Studio Ghibli movie, it's very beautifully shot. Every Studio Ghibli movie of a certain era is always beautifully shot.
Uh-huh.
And this absolutely falls in that era period, and it's quite possibly one of Studio Ghibli's saddest films.
Possibly the saddest film as far as I can think of, because every other movie that I know of them, it is the most lighthearted and cutesy thing that you'd ever see. I mean, good lord, this movie was released right next to My Neighbor Totoro.
Which is like the embodiment of that.
Literally a big fluffy monster.
So yeah, like, if you're on the fence about that and that doesn't really sound that interesting to you, then continue on, because we're about to give, like, semi-spoiler stuff, going a little bit more in-depth here. We're not going to try... I'm going to at least not try to, like, flat-out say the ending of the movie, but we might insinuate it quite heavily.
Well, I honestly think that the ending of the movie was actually shown literally at the beginning of the movie.
Yeah, I believe so.
You literally find out immediately what's going to happen to these characters, but you see how they get to where they are. So, without out of the way, heavily major spoilers starting right now. I'm not giving you a timestamp to where you can skip to. You're on your own.
Well, it's going to be right throughout the rest of the episode, so.
Yeah. Alright, so, the beginning of the movie, we see our older brother character. I cannot remember the people's names, I'm sorry. But the older character...
Oh, also a bit of a alert for this. We watched this
months ago.
Some time ago, yeah.
Yeah, this was months ago. We are trying our hardest to recollect. I still remember details of the movie. Mainly my one major criticism. Bryce, I think, still remembers two of his.
Yes, we're going to go over them when we get to criticisms, because I'm not going to just upfront them, because in the end of the day, they are minor criticisms.
Yeah. I think there's more positives than there are negatives.
Yeah.
But, the starting of the movie, the older brother's dead.
Yes.
He's literally sitting in a subway station, I think, or a train station, and he's literally starving to death. And once he's died, he sees the ghost of his sister, and they are, quote, reunited, and they're going to the afterlife. Yeah, bleak as all get out. We see a kid dying, and everybody around him is just ignoring him.
Yeah.
I guess it's pretty accurate to how the end of World War II was like in Japan, where there was not much resources or any real way to take care of each other. Yeah. So then pretty much, that's how this movie starts. Then we go to a major flashback to where I believe it was the older brother trying to carry his sister back home and trying to get to their mother, and there's a fire parade happening as they are trying to get there.
Yes. So, there is going to be talking about a lot of that kind of stuff in this movie. This does tackle the firebombings quite heavily. Matter of fact, of film, this is probably the movie that tackles it the most that I've seen, because it's a very prevalent part in the Pacific theater of the firebombings. That's a very important thing to talk about, and this is one of the few movies that talks about it a lot, to the scale that it actually deserves.
Well, they show it quite a lot. I mean, heck, firebombing, it wasn't as an expensive adventure for, say, the United States or the Allies to continuously use, because, I mean, look, you're not wasting a large amount of ammunition and all these other valuable resources. Firebombing is just literally what it says.
Yeah, firebombing is very easy to do, is very cheap, and the U.S. did it a lot.
Especially in Japan, where a large amount of the homes and infrastructure was literally made out of wood.
Yeah, so just to give you an idea of this, the amount of people who died in the firebombings in Japan far outweighs the number of people who died to the atomic bomb totaled.
Yes.
Totaled. There is so many people who died during the firebombings, and they're not talked about enough because of that.
I mean, heck, even then, the firebombings were possibly way more destructive than, say the atomic bombs.
Because they destroyed, how many cities? Like, thousands, probably?
I mean, there's a famous image of Tokyo where it's just literally just a large beam of light around it, and then there's smoke going around. I believe it was just a photo taken by the pilots they were just reaching over on their windows and just snapping pictures of the city of Tokyo.
Mm-hmm.
It looked disgusting.
Yeah,
However,
so
this whole entire that just adds into like the whole theme of like the whole anti-war sentiment that I believe the whole Studio Ghibli just has. I mean, last night, for example, I watched Howl's Moving Castle with friends, and there's a whole bunch of anti-war themes in this, but that was tackling the Iraq War. This is talking about World War II, where I believe both the directors were little kids at this time.
bad lineup.
So they definitely saw the horrors and the aftermath of even the tail end of the war. So, yeah, they probably have a lot to say. However, there is some interesting things I found interesting with them is that they're not explicitly pro-Japanese and anti-West. Even though...
yeah, this does take a pretty medium field on it.
it's like, they don't really point... They don't really side with either one, even though it's just showing how much it affected the civilians. It's more of a pro-civilian type of thing of like they are not doing anything inherently wrong. It's just that they're caught in the crossfire. Which,
yeah, this is taking very much the civilian idea opposed to the imperialist idea, which is very nice.
Except for the boy, but his
we'll get to that later.
Yeah, but I think his is more excusable in that he is literally just a kid.
Yeah.
But
I do have comments about that later.
We
So.
we both have comments about that later, but
But another thing to also talk about with this movie is none of the characters are likable, and it's per design.
yeah, I've had this. Like a bunch of the adult characters are not likable.
Yeah.
Like the ones that at least we spend the most amount of time with. I would actually make the exception of the mother because she's literally dead. She's dead
she
in the
gets like
first
2 lines though.
yeah, she gets like 2 lines and then 15 minutes and that's it. We don't hear about the dad because
you see a picture of him.
Pictures of a dad and that's it. And that's it.
Yeah.
He dead. Everybody's dead. literally this entire story. Everyone dies.
Yeah, there's a lot of very unlikable characters in this movie.
Yeah.
As per design.
Yeah. Yeah, so, okay, I guess we can move on with the whole story, though. Like, when the mother passes away, the brother and the sister are then sent off to stay with their aunt.
Yes.
And she's the worst character out of all of them.
Yeah, of the unlikable characters, she is definitely top of that iceberg.
Mm-hmm.
She does a lot of, just to give you like a sense of scale, it's basically I guess it's fair to call them refugees at that point.
Oh, yeah.
Basically, like, needing to live in her house, and her first response is basically insulting them to death.
Yeah, she's, like, literally just telling them, like, y'all should be out working despite... Literally, the boy is not even 10 years old at this point, if not just a tad bit older, and the girl, the little sister is, like... I'm gonna say she's like a toddler or something.
Oh, definitely a toddler. I'm guessing like 4 or something.
4 or 5, and it's just like, geez Louise, woman. I mean, look, you can make it the excuse of like, oh, it's the war and resources are scarce, but if it's apparently your own family, what the flying hell is wrong with you? Unless it's a cultural thing, then I mean...
I'm guessing it's a cultural thing.
It's gotta be a cultural thing.
Japan does put a large emphasis on working. Like, a very large emphasis on working.
At least modern day Japan definitely.
Oh, and I'm guessing, and I'm willing to wager that that is carried over from culture. I'm guessing that's not a modern cultural thing. I'm guessing that's just something that's carried over for long periods of time.
Perhaps. I don't know. I was thinking how much importance Confucian beliefs have on Japan.
I'm guessing not that much.
I don't know. There is... I mean, like, the whole idea of Confucian ideals is just, like, the respect of your elders and your ancestors. Or even your relatives, but...
That's fair.
That's what I was thinking of. But, all around, yeah. Then eventually the brother and the sister get tired of it, and they venture on their own.
Yes.
And it all goes downhill from there, very slowly.
Yeah.
Because, like, they have a decent amount of, like, resources. They have rice. They have a decent shelter to stay at. But it's just... keeps going down faster and faster than the line that measures the market economy.
So, the best way I can really describe this is, imagine yourself when you were 10. Imagine yourself when you were 10. And your parents just left the house. And you were left in your house. Now imagine that, you from 10 years old, for the next few years, and where you would be at that in your life if your parents just left you in your house.
Yeah, like...
Because that's exactly what happens here.
I mean, literally, you would start off with having your food, your water, and your electricity. But then over time, you'll run low on food, the electricity gets cut off, the water gets cut off, things start piling up, and all of a sudden you're reduced to being a skeleton.
Yeah.
Unless somehow there's a way for you to go get it without stealing it, but these kids have to resort to stealing eventually.
Yeah, this is basically about the downfall of two kids basically left to a society and them thinking that they need to fend on their own.
We live in a society, don't we?
Well.
I had to. Sorry.
But this is, as I was saying, with the meme aside.
With the meme aside.
This is basically a movie about two kids left to fend on their own.
Mm-hmm.
Even though they really weren't forced to, they just kind of forced themselves to, which is very odd.
Yeah, like the older brother is like really stubborn. Like even if like people offer them a little bit of help, he just refuses. It's like, I am my own person. I can fend for myself and my sister. Go away.
Yeah.
But that would eventually cost them their lives at the very end of the day.
Yeah. In which case, they do set up his stubbornness very early on.
Yeah.
So this isn't just like this is like very active character building going out through the movie. So.
Yep. Alright.
Like for example, the very beginning of the movie is him basically attempting to hide something. What was it again? And just basically how stubborn he is about it. Oh, it was his mother's thing. What was it?
Oh, it was his mother's dress.
Oh yes, that's what it was.
It was the wedding dress, I believe.
Yeah, so basically, like, very stubborn about basically making sure that his sister never learns that the mother is dead for, like, quite early on in the movie.
It was, like, literally throughout the entire movie. I don't think she ever knew at all. And so,
possibly. I don't remember, but I think you might be right.
I don't know, because, like, it seemed like the older brother was trying to shield her of all the horrors that were going on. Like, the older brother's the only one that grasps the situation. This little girl knows nothing.
Yeah.
At all. And it's mostly just heartbreaking to see how she's literally having to go through all of this while being in the total dark about everything, really.
Yeah.
I mean, the only thing that the older brother would be totally in the dark about is in regards to the status of their dad.
Yeah.
Because he's out in the Navy, and if you know anything about the Navy in Japan in the Pacific Theater, yeah, not good. Not very good at all.
Chances of survival, slim.
Chances of survival, there are none.
Yeah.
Oh, I hate to say that, but
it's very bad.
Yeah. But all around, why don't we start with some positives, I guess?
Yes. So, obviously, as I said at the very beginning, this is a Ghibli movie in their prime.
Mm-hmm.
Totoro was probably in their prime, but this was released alongside of it, so this has absolutely that scale of beauty.
Yes.
Like, if I were to guess, like, of movie beauty, I'd definitely put Ghibli at the top there. Like, not at the top, but definitely close to the top.
Like, how they animate nature is one of my favorite things about Ghibli. That's, like, the number one thing I think of when I think about Ghibli is the animation and how amazing they can, like, just pretty much paint beautiful sceneries, especially with Japan, despite there being war going on.
Yeah, and this is Studio Ghibli during its, like, prime time. Like, it's prime in animation, because this is when they're releasing Totoro, which is possibly one of their most beautiful. Howl's Moving Castle, I think, was a few years around that time.
Let's see. This movie came out around 1988, I believe.
And then, like, Spirited Away is often considered, like, their peak. Like, they're, like, one of the most beautiful movies of all time.
That was the early 2000s, but even still, like, all around, whenever you watch a Ghibli movie, you're not going to see bad animation.
Yeah, by the way, the time I'm saying here is like a 20-year span. So this is not like a 3-year thing. This is like a 20-year.
Even still, I want to bet a large amount of the people that worked on the movies were still mostly all together.
Yeah.
You'll be consistently seeing some good works of art. That's all we can really say.
Yeah. So this is a very beautiful movie. This is definitely tackling a very heavy topic. I really find the story here to be very unique.
Mm-hmm.
I do really enjoy it. And this is also told from a very interesting perspective. I really enjoy the perspective that this is written from.
Mm-hmm.
And just because also... this is another thing that I have to give credit to because I can see this getting wrong in animation a lot. This is kind of one of those bigger flaws. I talked about this in a very lengthy paragraph in the top 50s, if you wind up seeing that video. But what it is basically that animation is very hard to get right.
Yes.
And there is, with animating people in particular, it's very easy to do it wrong. And that's something that I've seen a lot. And Studio Ghibli is very good about not being bad about it. They're very capable of doing that, but I have to bring up credit to that because I see it done wrong a lot. And it just feels like this kind of uncanny thing in a lot of movies, but this movie is very good at being able to animate in such a believable, interesting way.
Yeah.
This movie doesn't hold back.
No, it doesn't.
Does not stop any of its punches.
Yeah, like literally we have a shot of the mother being all bandaged up, and there's still the whole bloodiness, and like it's not pretty to look at. Thankfully, this whole movie isn't in live action, because if it was, I'd be really thinking, do I really want to watch this entire movie?
Oh, this would be a very gruesome movie if this was live action.
Shoot, I've seen some movies that tackled some of the war crimes in World War II, like the whole Nanking situation that Japan did. Yeah, that'd be some topic that we could talk about in a movie. I know there was one with Christian Bale in it.
Oh boy.
Oh, yeah, you're not ready for it. Anyway, so all around, like, this movie does not hold back its punches.
Yeah.
We see the horrors, we see the pain, we see the suffering. All around, it's not a very fun movie.
Yeah.
Like, it's very tonally different. Like, how about this? Like, if you're gonna watch Totoro, you would watch it in a pretty day like this.
Yes.
Meanwhile, with Grave of the Fireflies, you would watch it during a thunderstorm.
Yeah.
Like, during the middle of winter, at least. Good lord.
But yeah, any of the other positives you want to say? Because I do want to move on to some of the more nitpicky stuff that I do have for this movie.
I don't really think so. It's like, really, I like the whole story and the whole perspective that it focuses on. And the whole animation, of course, is always top-notch. You can always expect a lot of really good animation from Studio Ghibli. It's really, really hard to find one that I could say was really bad, but there are... I only have like one major issue with the movie, but it is regards to a certain scene.
Yes. In which case, if you're willing to get into nitpicks, I can start that off.
Yeah, so start.
I'm going to be talking over the thing I think we are primarily thinking, because it's one of the bigger nitpicks that we always bring up. I'm going to start with the other ones first.
Yeah, go ahead.
In which case, just to give a little bit of a preamble, by the way, we watched the Japanese version.
Yes.
So we watched it subbed.
Yes.
I believe the terminology, yeah.
Yeah, technically that was my fault, because I was supposed to get this movie for dubbed, because Bryce has problems with subtitle stuff.
There's a reason why I have a harder time with foreign films. I am just not a particularly good reader. I have a high caliber of dyslexia, so movies with high dialogue are a lot harder for me to read, hence foreign films being a lot harder for me to enjoy. With that said, a foreign film with very little dialogue is much easier for me to enjoy.
Yes.
This is not that movie. This movie does have a lot of dialogue.
Yeah, there is quite a heavy amount of dialogue and a large amount of characters just talking.
So, pardon me, I might not have everything correct, because the dialogue did move by quite quickly for me.
Yes.
But with that said, I didn't miss that much, I think. It has been some time, but I did think I get a good amount of that. But with that all said, I did miss quite a bit of dialogue, because the dialogue does go quite quickly, because we watched the Japanese version.
Yes. I feel like you get the basic rundown of the whole story. I'm trying to remember certain pieces. There were certain certain lines in the movie that made me think a whole lot. I mean, this was tying into the whole title of the movie. The little sister and the older brother, the night before, they were catching fireflies, and they were putting them in a bucket, and then the next morning, all of them were dead, and the little sister was asking, why do fireflies have to die so soon? And it just made me think, what are the overall themes of the movie? And I thought, I guess it ties in a little bit, like the fragility of being a young child in the middle of a war-torn nation, and literally these people will die so fast just by one small instance. So why do they have to die so soon? When literally you are in the prime of youth, you are a child, you're literally a shining little beacon for a lot of people, and then literally that life to be taken away from you just like that.
brightest fires burn out the quickest.
Yeah. Essentially, yeah. So yeah, I can see why Bryce might miss certain lines, but I always thought, that line.
Yeah, so I won't be able to comment on like very particular dialogues like that, just because everything was moving so quickly for me that I didn't have time to stop and be like, ooh, what's that line mean? I was like, the next line was already coming. I need to be like, okay, what's this saying now?
Oh man, we are gonna have some issues with some foreign movies in the future.
So just a preface about that, I'm probably gonna try for the future. I didn't do it this one. I just didn't have time. I meant to also watch the English version before recording this, but I didn't have the time because I was very busy this week.
But it was also a little bit my fault because I asked him yesterday, hey, can we to record this one? Because I have no episodes really ready to record and not just record, just to edit down and have them all released. So
yeah, I was planning on watching Gurl the Fireflies next week. But then it got springed on me that we were watching it today. I was like, oh, dang it.
Yeah, sorry.
It's fine.
We will probably talk about Ghibli movies. Well, at least I know we have a huge Hayao Miyazaki retrospective sometime in the future. I may include Isao Takahata to at least talk about him, because I think his movies are also a little bit interesting, just based off of what little I've seen of him. So yeah, we'll maybe talk more about this movie sometime in the future when we get the chance.
But just to preface about that, in future ones, I try to watch foreign films multiple times so that way I can get the line multiple times, but I just didn't have the time this time.
Yes.
So.
However, yeah, he doesn't hate foreign films.
Yeah, I have several foreign movies on my top 50 if you go back and look.
Yep.
Matter of fact, there's one on there that's very dialogue heavy.
Yeah.
With No Man's Land. That's a very dialogue heavy movie.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a foreign film, so.
Yep. All around, yes. So. Let's talk about like the other nitpick that you have.
Yes, I did have a preface for that leading into this as well.
Yes,
because we watched the Japanese version. Personally, I didn't enjoy the voice acting for the Japanese actress for the little girl.
Yeah,
I didn't enjoy it. It's not that I hated it; I just didn't like it.
Yeah.
It just felt too grating for me personally.
I personally did not have much of an issue with it. I thought she was very serviceable as is. And she was able to have the whole childhood innocence pretty much nailed down to what I was assuming was what she was going for. I personally didn't have an issue with it, but I'm willing to bet it's like with Japanese actresses, whenever they do children or something like that, they do have a higher pitch and this kind of stuff.
I feel they compensated a little too much, in my opinion.
Probably. I don't know for sure, but...
With that said, the rest of the voice acting is fantastic.
Oh yeah, all around, like, everybody
She's the only one I have a problem with.
All around, like, yeah, the rest of them, they're pretty solid. Like, I had no real issue with them.
No.
Japanese voice acting is usually some of the peak voice acting that you could find anywhere in the world. Like, they take very good pride in their voice acting.
Yeah. And next up is another very small one, which is... This is a two-parter, kind of this is once again focused around the young girl character, is I didn't enjoy the design too much. This is for two reasons. One, once again, I am also have color blindness, so she did have rosy cheeks, and that was its own thing. But, more particularly, is that this is more of a secondary problem of so many of the characters are illustrated so similar to each other. And most particularly are the children.
Yeah.
The only distinguishing factor that the young girl has is that she has slightly redder cheeks.
So, I actually did a little bit of research into this. So the whole idea is this is actually a small cultural thing. I know in, like, China, for example, they had it to where, like, usually a lot of the children would have very similar haircuts amongst each other. And this would probably be the same way with, like, the children in Japan. I mean, they're very closely knit together culturally.
Yes,
so,
that makes sense.
So pretty much, yeah, like the girl and a bunch of the children in Japan, I'm not that shocked that some of them had very similar designs or even just like haircuts.
Yeah.
But this might have been also an issue of like, oh, it's time compression, we can't really design overly different character designs for every single person.
Yeah.
Some are
I'm not going to criticize them on doing it. The only problem I really had with it was there was multiple scenes where, as a viewer, I had trouble distinguishing because of it.
Yeah.
Where there would be a little girl on screen, and she'd be shot from the back or the side or something, and I'd just be like, okay, so that's the little girl. And I was like, no, that's just a different little girl that we put on the screen that looks the exact same. And it was just like, oh, okay. Like, it led to some very confusing moments in the movie because they had very similar character designs.
I'm willing to bet whenever we watch this movie sometime in the future, you'll finally be able to piece together, maybe even with actual English dub, maybe we'll actually see, like, oh, okay, now I know who's who and who because of the different voices that I know English speakers usually have. I don't know too much about Japanese ones.
Ultimately, this movie does have, because of not only the problems that I have, not only is it a very communicative problems that has, like, not the best communication to the audience, but you need to communicate stuff very well to me, particularly, like, visually, because that's the best way to do it is visually, but I do have visual problems as well, so you need to be careful about that, but ultimately that's the best way to still do it.
Yeah.
So you need to be very cautious about that kind of stuff, and this movie does bump on the road a little bit on that journey. And then the last big nitpick that I want to talk about, which is my actual biggest one.
Yes, so me and him actually shared a very similar criticism overall. However, maybe I might think it isn't as major, but when you think about it through a historical perspective, it could tear it up a tad bit. So
this movie prides itself, not prides itself, but does one job very well. And that is being, well, technically two jobs very well, and both will be playing in. One, it's very good at being able to focus on the civilians, being able to focus on the people at that time, and it's also very good at being able to focus on kind of the environment, the existence of that, and those play both hand in hand, and it's very important because of how good this movie is doing that it continues to do that, to not break that. And there's one particular scene in the movie that really broke it for one scene.
Yes. So, towards the end of the movie, we have our younger brother character. He is off trying to find a letter and see that his dad has responded to him, and eventually he finds out that no, your dad is dead, like everybody else in this Day and Go movie. And so he's over in the post office, and we have these two male characters on the side that are talking amongst each other about the status of the war, and the younger brother goes up to them and asks them, are we winning in the war? Are we about to win? Blah, blah, blah. And they both look at him shocked, like, no, we lost, we surrendered. And the boy character seems to have that whole accuracy of like, oh my god, we lost, the Empire of Japan has fallen. But the two older men characters, so how do we say this, Lord have mercy?
There's multiple ways to talk about this because it is being a lot more scaled down by what you're saying, because yes, he's asking these old men, but he is in a public space. This is with several other characters that are shown in the scene. There's probably, if I were to guess, like 8.
Oh yeah, that's right. There was more people in there. I thought it was just like those 3.
No. There was a whole bunch of people around, and the boy begins freaking out because he just got told basically the impossible, because Japan was very much conditioned to believe that they cannot lose.
Yes.
They 100% believed that during that time. They had this idea of, you cannot break us down. It is impossible. Yes. You will have to kill every single one of us to do it.
Yes. Mainly because of, like, their whole... It was a matter of, like, both their religion and overall the Emperor.
Yes.
The Emperor is seen as the descendant of the Sun God. I don't remember the name. Crap. It was on my head a while ago, but now I lost it. But overall, yeah, like, the Sun God and the Emperor is supposed to be seen as a major deity, and he is literally the one that is, like, destined to, like, he can just not lose. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Japan is literally the land of the rising sun. We are invincible, and then all of a sudden we lose.
Yeah. And the problem I really have with this is the boy character freaks out, but that's not the problem. That's the perfect reaction of like, no, that's not possible. I will not believe this. That is, like, he's sitting there freaking out and losing it. He's going through all the stages of grief. But everyone at the post office is looking at him as if he's insane. That's the problem.
Yes.
No one understands him when they should be.
Maybe there's only one instance in which you can make the case of, like, this boy is so brainwashed. Because, like, leading up to World War II, the children were literally brainwashed to thinking that Japan was invincible. And I don't know much about, say, like, the adults, but I still probably make the case that the adults, they had to have think as well, like, yeah, we are invincible, we're not going to die.
So, the main thing that I'm in particular criticizing here is there was several people in the scene, multiple people. We take a wide shot at one point so we can see everyone. And it's this one guy sitting there freaking out, and a whole bunch of people staring at him if he's insane. I have extreme difficulty believing that so many people are shown in the scene that think that this dude who does not believe Japan lost is insane. Because there were so many. The idea of a loss for Japan was infallible by so many people. Inconceivable. It was just not something that so many of them would ever think and be able to be like, yes, that they would not be able to just think, oh yeah, we lost. No, they would have this reaction with this boy freaking out, being like, either comfort him or be like, oh yeah, like, I don't understand either. They would be on his side of like, I don't get this either. We had this loss, opposed to looking at him if he's a nut job. Like, their reaction is the part that's problematic here of like, this boy saying they're losing his mind, and people are like, yeah, we lost, kid, get over it. Like, that's not the reaction they would have.
Honestly, it would be more accurate for them to have a very similar reaction to him. And even
or at least comfort him.
Yeah, or comfort him especially. I mean, good lord. Like, everybody in Japan, whenever they surrendered, they were all scared. They thought that the United States was going to trample in and destroy everything.
Yeah.
They were going to
Which is a completely reasonable thing to think.
Yeah. They thought, well, overall, like, that was they were conditioned to think that.
Yeah.
They were told that the United States was the enemy. They were going to kill everybody. They were going to assassinate the emperor. They were going to do all these different things.
Yeah, like, they all had that belief that was instilled from them for so long. And for the reaction to be...
meh.
Yeah, like, to basically
like
be they lost a t-ball game. Like,
I was about to say, they lost a baseball game or something like that. Oh my god.
Like, that's the equivalent reaction that they give to seeing someone losing their mind. Because, force of perspective, let's drag this out of this circumstance here. Let's take this out and drop it into, like, an actual baseball game. A baseball game is lost, and you're just sitting in the stands, you're probably gonna go, ah, shoot, dang it, we lost. And then you see a guy flipping his crap, be like, no! Like, you're probably gonna have the reaction of, like, what? Like, that's the equivalent reaction that they give.
Yeah.
When in reality, the proper reaction should be, like, let's say, U.S. news, national note, because we're probably going to have majority, like, U.S. viewers. Like, let's say it comes out on the news that X nation has rolled in and has taken over, like, X amount of states, and the U.S. has conceded and given that up.
Yeah.
That's basically what happened in terms of Japan. Like, that just got announced. Most people's reactions are going to be like, what the F?
Yeah,
like, they're going to be baffled. Their mind's going to be like, what?
Yeah, literally, like, the whole idea around Japan was that they were so conditioned to think that they were invincible that literally, like, the whole idea of, like, we either win or we die. Like, the whole suicide thing was no real joke. Like, very few of them ever actually surrendered willingly, and it was seen as a dishonorable thing. So there was the whole worry with the United States of, like, if we don't make them surrender, they're literally not going to stop.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's that very whole possibility around it, and it's just like with Japan and their civilians, it's like, there's no way that we would surrender. That would be dishonorable, especially for the emperor. Nope, they did.
Yeah.
They did.
That's, like, the only scene I really have a problem with. Note, though. It really bugs me.
Yeah, it bugs me too a little bit as a historian, but I don't think it really broke the movie for me. It's just a baffling scene to think of when you know the context of the history that was happening at the time.
The biggest problem I have with the scene is the information we get in it. Because it's supposed to be a very important scene. Because this is when we learn that they're now truly alone. He was having this hope up that his father was going to come back. His father's going to come back. And he's finally learns that no.
Yeah, literally his whole world is shattered.
Yeah. And there should be a proper reaction to that, because this movie is taking on such a good stance of that, but then they go in and have this extremely unrealistic stance. Now, if this is a movie that's, like, clearly, like, oh, we're more here to set up the environment, we're not caring about the reactions, but this movie does that so well. It sets up the proper reactions until this one scene.
Yeah.
So, like, the movie does such a good job of being able to really be. Like, I don't know how else to describe it. It's that.
Yeah.
And this one scene isn't.
Mm-hmm.
It feels so out of place. And it really annoys me.
Alright. But yeah, with that whole scene in mind and overall, what did you think of the movie, Bryce?
Oh, it was great.
Yeah, it was mostly great. Literally, whenever I was watching this whole movie, I just could tell, like, overall, like, there is a large amount of heart and soul put into the movie. And overall, I was just like, yeah, this is mostly just good. It was like, besides that one major blemish, I just thought, yeah, this is overall a good movie. I can see why a lot of people adore this movie.
Yeah.
Quite a lot.
Ghibli movies have some problems every once in a while. We're going to talk about that every once in a while. But
Yeah.
with that said, they're still probably the best animated movie studio out there.
Yeah.
At least, like, continuously with their movies. Like, if I were to guess studios that have made some of the best animated movies of all time, I might say Ghibli probably has made the most best.
In terms of, like, overall quality, yeah, usually they are very consistent. I haven't seen the worst one yet. I mean, apparently, like, one of the worst ones, I know they made one last year that was actually not 2D animated. It was 3D animated. And I haven't seen that one, but I've seen very mixed opinions on that one. But and then there was another one with Hayao Miyazaki's son that he made a movie back in 2006. That one has mixed opinions, but overall, I still think, like, they have more hits than overall misses. I mean, look at other, like, major animated studios like, say, Disney or Pixar. They have a few misses, and I think Ghibli has...
I would say
Pixar's
moved on to the point where it's 50-50 at that point.
Well, at least, like, today, my opinion on Pixar is very mixed.
Yeah, like, in my opinion, like, look, if we pull up all the Pixar movies, they have a great beginning end and a really bad current end.
Yeah.
Because of that, it looks very 50-50.
Yeah. For me, like, with Pixar, though, it's like their movies of today... I feel like they're not having to try nearly hard as they used to.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I feel like they have reached the point of, like, we have such name brand recognition that we are just too big to fail. I mean, it's like Disney, for example. They are too big to fail.
Yeah.
So, with Pixar, it's
with
like...
that said, they have had failures recently. So
they definitely
hard cut to
Mulan.
Well,
I mean, yeah, with Pixar recently, yeah, they've been releasing their stuff on the streaming services, and their first actual movie released into theaters in a long time... It bombed.
Yeah.
Honestly, I found it kind of funny, but I don't know. Maybe I'm a little bit cynical when it comes to that.
Oh, but then again, with that kind of stuff bombing, that's not going to send a good signal to Disney because they're going to sit there and think, because Marvel's still booming.
Well, yeah.
So.
Overall, yeah. However, with Ghibli, though, even they are that studio, at least today, with at least, I have this for our generation. Our generation adores Studio Ghibli movies.
Oh, yeah.
Like, the millennial crowd and Gen Z crowd, they adore Ghibli movies, and I just think, yeah, that's about right. And pretty much overall, I still think that Ghibli, even though they are, quote, that name that is a little bit too big to fail, they're not going to slow down or just have like an
Not the American audience, I don't think.
Not the American audience. Wait,
I feel like a lot of people have grown up at least seeing a Ghibli movie.
A Ghibli movie, or at least a couple of them.
Yeah. I grew up, I didn't watch any.
Well, yeah, I didn't either. I only saw maybe one.
Yeah, hence why I say one. Most people have probably seen one Ghibli movie.
But there are, like... But like, I still think, like, Ghibli has a bit of a name brand that some people might know of. They might know...
I don't think it's too big to fail yet, though.
Yeah, they probably haven't, really. I mean, look, I'm basing this off of, like, what I've seen... Like, say, in the public sphere. I've seen a bunch of Ghibli references in movies. I've seen a bunch of Ghibli merchandise in stores. Like, say...
Oh, merchandising, yeah.
Yeah, like, merchandise, like, stores... Like, I don't know, like Spencer's and Barnes and Noble or whatever. I've seen those kinds of things, and I just came to the conclusion of, like, I guess they are, like, what is it called? Mainstream, I guess?
For merchandising, I would say so.
Yeah.
I wouldn't say for...
Like, releasing a movie and...
I would say the studio, like, using wrestling terminology here, I wouldn't say the studio is over, I would say the merchandise is.
Possibly, you might
Well,
say.
I would argue that Pixar is over.
Well, yeah. Pixar is so over at this point that they can never, quote, make a heel turn that is...
Yeah.
My God. Okay, sorry for using wrestling terminology, but...
What we're basically saying there is people love Pixar, but people haven't gotten to the point of so many people love Studio Ghibli.
Yes.
People love Studio Ghibli. It's just not so many.
Maybe, how about this, for example? This would probably be the closest thing that I could think of. People that are really into either animated movies in general, or people that are really into looking into movies in general, like me and you, for example. They love Ghibli movies in a certain type of way that, say, maybe some people that are really big into Disney are in a way. So you have that crowd of those that are like, you have the movie people, and then you also have the animated people. I mean, look, animated people love Ghibli movies. If you've ever sat down and watched like a bunch of television shows or even animated TV shows, TV, animated shows, and animated movies, you're going to find a Ghibli reference somewhere. I know for a fact. Pixar made one with Totoro and one of their...
Oh, it was like movies. Toy Story, I think.
Yeah, it's there somewhere. So
Toy Story 3, maybe? It doesn't matter.
Either way, Ghibli is very much beloved by at least a certain... I wouldn't call it a niche at this point.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it a niche. It's kind of like in this weird middle ground, in my opinion, of being mainstream and niche. It's in that weird middle ground. I wouldn't call it cult following either. It's above that still.
Oh, yeah. Like, heck, it did have a major cult following for a good while.
Oh, yeah.
But until Spirited Away came out and it won Best Animated Feature, that's when I think the chugging came along to where, like, okay, Ghibli is becoming more and more famous than it was before. Because back in the day, it was mostly just seen as... Ghibli was the Pixar for Japan.
Oh, yeah.
They literally, every movie they released was a banger in the box office, critically and commercially. So, overall, yeah.
But as I was saying, of Ghibli movies, I wouldn't rank this as my best, but I would not say this is their worst. No. Not by far.
I would still say like this is one of their strongest pieces, and definitely the most unique out of all of them, because comparing everything else, where it's more fantastical and out of this world... This one is more down-to-earth Ghibli movies that I've seen, and which is why I think this is one of the more unique ones. So, overall, yeah. So
if I were to rank the Studio Ghibli movies I've seen, I'd probably put this top 5.
Yeah, I probably would do that too. It definitely has a lot of pros onto it, and it has a lot more weight that makes you at least think about it every now and again. It isn't a movie that'll make you want to go back and rewatch it again, but it's definitely
this is not a very rewatchable movie in my opinion.
No,
not from what I've seen. I haven't rewatched it, but from initial viewing, I don't. This doesn't feel like a movie I'd want to go back and rewatch.
Not to feel happy, at least.
Yeah.
But overall, it's still one of their more stronger, emotionally driven movies.
Yes.
And I still think it's very solid. And overall, I'd give it a 8 out of 10.
Probably could concur with that, Brandon.
Yeah.
Alright, and then moving on to my movie. So we're only going to be reviewing 2. This is going to be pretty similar to how we review movies going forward for our movie list. We're typically going to be doing 2 to 3 movies per episode going on, unless we do a specialty episode.
Lord have mercy, the specialty episodes are going to be interesting. But overall,
You've seen the listing that I made for them.
Yeah, I've already seen the schedule. I might show snippets of it, maybe in the description. I don't know yet. That's for,
well, you're
that's
at least
for
going to see
future
the movies that we're watching next week.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
Well, not next week, but next episode.
Yeah, next episode, you will be let know, like, hey, these are the movies. If we don't say it in the episode, in the video, it'll be in the description. Just check to the bottom.
In which case, talk about our next movie and final movie for today.
Yes.
The Elephant Man by David Lynch.
Yes.
So.
Alright, so what do we do first?
I believe this movie was made in 1980.
I actually think that's about right. Like 1980, I think. Was
yeah.
actually the exact year.
Possibly. It was it was either early 80s or 80 right on the dot.
Yeah.
In which case, to give a little bit of preface, this is based off a true story.
Yes.
This is based off of a man named John Morick or something like that. John
Merrick.
Merrick, that's it. I was like, Morick? Merrick, that's it.
No. I do know, like, this movie was released around the same time as another movie. So, like, overall, like, a very simple synopsis. This movie is about a man that has a very awful disformity in his whole entire body, not just his face. And he's, like, trying to live his life with this deformity in the late 1800s of the Victorian age. So, that's one of that. But there was another movie that was released around the same time called Mask, where it was a boy that had a facial disfigurement in the 1960s, and he's trying to live his teenage years before he eventually dies around the age of 16. So I don't know. It felt like it was like a weird, like, oh, these movies were released around similar times, but they are completely different in. I want to say different in some of their execution, but mostly because of the director of Elephant Man, which we will talk more of.
Yes, we'll talk about David Lynch probably towards the end of this, similar to how we talked about Studio Ghibli at length by the end of that. So
yes. Okay, so how should we talk about the Elephant Man?
Yeah, so now we're probably going to begin talking about some spoilers, but before we do, this is another sadder film.
I would say it's possibly maybe a little bit sadder because of the whole live action, and there's a lot more facial features that they were able to express, but it's not a knock on Great Fireflies. This one is just one that is a little bit harder to get through. The
particular stars that I would give here of, like, note, because what I would say this movie does best to keep an eye out for, so if you're just looking for, like, a movie, if these things sound interesting to you, this has absolutely fantastic makeup, as is required. This has very good costuming. The acting is very superb. I love the acting in this movie.
Oh, literally, like, so our two main leads are Anthony Hopkins, one of the best actors of all time, and John Hurt, one of the other best actors of all time.
John Hurt.
Love
John Hurt.
Literally, John Hurt is phenomenal. I don't think he won an Oscar for this, sadly. He literally should have.
Robbed.
Yeah, literally got robbed. And there was another great actress, I should say. So this would be the doctor's wife. There's only one major scene with her, but she was in it.
Gives a flawless performance in this.
Yes, literally perfection. But overall, like,
those are the standards I would say: makeup, costuming, and particularly acting.
Yes. So overall, yeah. So, what should we say? Is there anything else that we want to say before we
jump into spoilers? I don't think so.
Okay, yeah, literally, that's the best we can give it to you, because, like, this movie, you kind of have to spoil a little bit with what this whole movie's going on about. So yeah, that's your one warning. 3, 2, 1. Okay, so what is the Elephant Man pretty much about?
So this is about the actual person, basically from discovery by the Royal Sciences, I believe it was, to his death.
Yes. So pretty much this was like how we see Joseph Merrick, or John Merrick, he's called in both ways, but we are introduced to him as the Elephant Man in a freak show, as it were, where people with severe disabilities, whether they have dwarfism, other issues like with their body.
Yeah, so a very popular thing during this time is you would see people with dwarfism, you would see people with profound body hair. You're going to wind up seeing people with either, like, missing body parts or malformed. Basically, like, very severe, very outknowing, like, very hard to hide actual bodily
deformities.
Yeah. And he was considered by the actual, I guess, ringmaster, or whatever you would call him as, basically his prize. Like, the freak of the freak, which is...
That's disheartening.
Yeah.
So, what did Joseph Merrick have? Well, from what I did a little bit of research into what his issue was. He had a deformity to where literally parts of his body grew massive tumors in it.
Yes.
So, he had, like, massive tumors in his skull, and it was, like, literally bulging out, and all the way down to his hands, his arms, and even his feet. Made it impossible for him to even walk, let alone even breathe.
Yeah.
So, this whole thing is where we are introduced to him as the Elephant Man, and he is shown to us for the first time, and the Doctor is the one character that we are all experiencing it through the lens of. He sees him, and automatically he is, like, heartbroken, saying, like, how can you profit off of the suffering of this one person? Let me take him into the hospital and see if we could do something for him. And, well, yeah, that's pretty much the story. He is taken into the hospital, and eventually we see him actually become an attraction of his own, actually.
Yes.
Which that creates its own dichotomy right there.
Yeah, so this is a very tragic tale. I don't want to spoil it too heavily, but this does kind of have this sense of he just wanted to live as a human.
Yes.
And the world wouldn't let him.
Yes, he, like, literally in the movie, like, he was yelling out that he is not an animal, and he just wants to be a human being.
One of the probably best lines in the movie.
Literally.
I am a human being!
I am a human being. I am a man.
Yes.
So literally, we are seeing how everybody in the world is just viewing him as like, you are a monster. Like, look how ugly you are or hideous you are. Despite whenever we learn about Joseph Merrick, he is pretty interesting. Like, he has a very major interest into the arts. He even was like building like a replica of a church that was inside of his window in his like hospital room. He overall just like has a very massive interest into little things like that, but he doesn't really get a chance to do that in public or go see him in public because of how he would be seen. He literally has to wear a cloak over his head just to get one place to another without being noticed. Even still, people take notice to him anyway.
Yeah. And yeah, that's like the main part of this movie is being able to, because this is, I believe this movie does take very minor liberties with the timeline. Particularly with most. I believe it's the timeline they take liberty with.
Yeah. Usually whenever you do a movie like this, as long as it doesn't hurt the narrative of the movie in terms of its inaccuracies, you'll mostly be forgiven.
Yeah.
9 times out of 10.
Most of the time you're allowed to just play fast and lose the timeline.
Yeah.
Just make sure the events are accurate.
Oh yeah. As long as not even just the events, as long as you get the characterization of the people right.
That is also true.
That is probably the most important. You gotta be very sincere and not deliberately portraying your people that you're showing as inaccurate, because overall that'll disrupt the narrative of the movie. So overall it's like you better make sure you know this is very believable for the people of the time.
Yeah, there is a couple of examples to really talk about that with movies doing it poorly. I know that you have a long list of movies that you're like, this is a movie who you gotta keep in mind the characters are like the most important thing about a movie. Mm-hmm. Like, if you're making a movie about someone, you gotta make sure that you get that correct. You cannot get that movie about that person wrong.
Yes, because overall, if you don't do it like that, you will create a sort of, like, you can possibly damage a person's reputation, or you will overinflate it to the point to where if the real person saw this adaptation, they would look at you and think, this is not me in the slightest.
Yeah.
This is not what I stood for. This is not what I am. Blah, blah, blah.
With a sense of, you do have to keep in mind there are some figures you're going to be adapting that are going to have that grand sense of themselves. Like we talked about Lawrence of Arabia, for example.
Quite literally, yeah.
Lawrence famously had an ego.
He literally did, but eventually over time that movie destroyed the ego.
Yeah, so that's a movie where it's like, it's not so much the character, the person seeing it and them approving, it's that someone else who knew that person approving it.
Pretty much overall, it's like you have to have the perspective of them, and as well the perspective of his peers.
Yeah, I feel the perspective of their peers is the more important part.
That could pretty much be made. You can make that argument, definitely. So overall, does this movie portray the characters in an actual accurate light? I'd say about nearly so.
Yeah, I would argue that this is probably one of the movies that does it the best.
Yeah, like whenever I try to look into a little bit about Joseph Merrick, some of the details were pretty accurate. Like, yeah, this is pretty much how he was. He was like very much interested into like the whole opera scene, for example. This was like a major thing that was what he was wanting in the movie. He wanted to go see the opera. And pretty much, yeah, he was very interested in it. He met different actresses and actors. He met a large amount of people of the upper class. And he's like, yeah, he really appreciates this whole sincerity of like what the art form can do. Now the Doctor, you could probably make the case that it wasn't as accurate, but I think it doesn't hurt the film nearly as bad as it could have.
He's not the primary character.
He's not the primary character, but we are technically, I would say he's more or less of a deadpan character. We are projecting ourselves onto him. Like, we are trying to show compassion for John Merrick and his whole illness, but there is an overarching subplot regarding the Doctor that is pretty much actually interestingly told. So, do you want to talk about that, or do you want to talk? Is there anything else you want to add on before we move on?
If you have something to say about that, I am interested.
So, in the movie, the Doctor pretty much was like seen as like, oh, I am going to save this man who is being thrown into society and to be made a mockery. I'm going to take him in and be his caregiver. Well, think about it like this. John Merrick, throughout the movie, he is given all these different things, and eventually people come and see him. Like, the upper class come up to meet him and whatnot. If you think about it in the perspective of an outsider, and you compare the Doctor to the original Ringmaster, is the Doctor any more better than, say, the Ringmaster was? Because he's using John Merrick as a prize of, like, look at everything that I'm doing for him. Like, say, I am studying him, I'm making a name for myself in the science community by taking care of him, and then having all these people come over here and see him. Am I really no better than, say, the Ringmaster, who was doing the exact similar thing? It was just in way worse conditions.
Yeah, there is a topic to actually discuss about that. In which case, you're only going to reach an opinion about that.
Yeah.
There is no correct decision.
There really is no correct decision overall on it. So it's just like, how much sincerity did the Doctor even really have is what I was thinking of. Is like, is he really being sincere? Is he like being a compassionate human being, trying to bring in this person that has a horrible disformity and to try to give him a better life? Because Lord have mercy, he didn't really have much to live anyway. I believe he died at the age of 27 or 29.
That sounds correct.
So pretty much it's like, he's like, what is the... what's the term I'm thinking of? The white savior complex. I guess you can make that point.
The Jesus complex.
Like the Jesus complex, yeah. So pretty much it's like, I'm just doing this. Like, he's trying to show the veneer of, like, I'm doing this because I'm trying to be a compassionate human being. But he could be using him as, like, for his own personal gain within, like, say, the medical field.
Yeah.
So that's a very interesting thing that I noticed throughout the movie. And I was like, huh, you can probably make that case. So that's one of the plots that I noticed it, but overall this whole movie is about the experience of John Merrick, and there is a relationship between him and the Doctor.
Yeah. In which case, if you don't have anything else to say about that, we can now move on to the flip side of the coin.
Yes.
Which I believe both of us only really have one criticism of the movie.
Yeah, there's only one really, yeah.
And it's the director. And I have notes on it.
Alright, so David Lynch is a director that I'm personally not very familiar with at all. I only know of him in certain movies and projects that he has done throughout the years. I mean, the only other movie that I think I've ever seen of David Lynch might have been his original adaptation of Dune from the 1980s. Yes. And if you know anything about that movie, that has its own can of worms. It's a very interesting talking piece to maybe go into, but we're not talking about Dune today.
Yeah.
So,
in which case, I have seen David Lynch before. Yes. I've seen several of his movies before. And I want to preface with this, I don't hate David Lynch. But he falls into the bin that I have of a director that has gotten on their horse and refuses to get off of it. There is several directors that I believe that they have gotten into their mind that the audience comes for X, I need to do X. And that causes problems in their movie because throughout Elephant Man, we have this one problem that keeps occurring, and it's one problem that I feel very passionate about, and it's surrealism. Scenes of just surrealism, and this is when I'm going to really talk about surrealism, because this is something that I feel very passionate about. Matter of fact, I made sure, well, I didn't make sure of it, but like, on my top 50, if you go and watch it, I have multiple surrealist pieces on there. Because I do like surrealism. I love surrealism in movies. Like, for example, Man with a Movie Camera is on there. Brazil is on there. Like God in Brazil is on there. I don't hate surrealism. But it's very important to understand why is surrealism put in film. Mm-hmm. And I feel that if something is put into a movie, it has to serve multiple functions. You can't put something in there for no reason. And the more reasons you put it in, the better. So, when naturally talking about, like, let's jump over to Grave of the Fireflies. Why did they put the mother's death in the movie? There's a lot of reasons they put that in there. Yeah. It is an emotional scene, it's character building, it progresses the plot, it sets up for future events. There's a lot of reasons why that is in the movie. Now, let's jump over to Elephant Man. there is several in-between sections where we'll get like a scene of an empty hall with a random noise, or we'll wind up getting a zoom in on something. So something you have to understand about surrealism is that you are naturally, just unequivocally, giving up understanding. A basic audience understanding of something. That is something you are sacrificing, and you need to do that for a good reason. And in my opinion, you have to do that for multiple good reasons. So, like, let me use Brazil, for example. It's a hilarious movie. It's absolutely ridiculous, but it has also a point. It has a message. So, not only is it delivering a message, but it's also doing this with humor. And it's doing this by setting up surrealism. I'm okay with that, because you are gaining more than you're losing.
Yes.
You're losing audience understanding, but you are being able to replace that by them not being able to understand it by being able to build humor, aka absurdist humor, because you are losing understanding for the purpose of humor, and you are also building a message. You are gaining more than you're losing from that, in my opinion. Therefore, that is a good use of surrealism. This movie is putting it in. You are actively losing audience retention, and it is for the purposes of really being able to build the director's ego. That's about it. This is a problem that I have with David Lynch in multiple movies. Just to give you a little bit of a time scale here, I believe the movie he did right before Elephant Man was Eraserhead. And the movie he did right after Elephant Man was Dune. That's the timeline. I believe right after Dune was Blue Velvet. I believe that's what came from there. And
I wouldn't know for sure.
After Blue Velvet... Oh gosh, what was after Blue Velvet? It doesn't matter. We're not talking about those other three movies, but to give a time frame there, I do want to quickly tap on Eraserhead. Because Eraserhead really shows what David Lynch thinks of his own directing. Because David Lynch made Eraserhead. And if you're not familiar with it, it is an extremely experimental piece. Yeah. In which case, the movie is very hard to describe because of any plot that it has is very heavily obscured by surrealist visuals and surrealist acting and a whole bunch of that. And because of that, David Lynch, I think, got into his head that he is a surrealist director. And because of that, he just began putting surrealist pieces in Elephant Man, because it was his following movie. And I felt that's where he really tripped on a mine. Because Eraserhead, I am not a big fan of it. It is, once again, filled with surrealism, and you're actively losing audience intention. And maybe you're sending a message, but you're not replacing that with anything. Mm-hmm. You're, at best, gaining as much as you're losing. But that doesn't make something good. That just makes a net profit of zero. Like, just talking about it in economical terms, this wasn't a good investment. So that is basically the same as, like, just having someone flat talk at, like, just basically basic dialogue. That is zero. Because you are making something boring, but you are getting dialogue through. You're progressing the plot. That's net zero. That is nothing. Yeah. A goose egg. That is a flat thing, and you want to avoid something being zero in a movie. So you need to always consider that, and this movie has those random in-between sections that does that a lot. And that's my biggest problem here, is that this movie turns net zero quite often. And because of that, it can come off as boring in very particular sections.
Yeah, I can see that. Overall, that was probably my main thing, was like the surrealism. It kind of took me out of the movie quite a lot. So it was like a really sincere, down-to-earth pieces of filmmaking in this, and I thought there's some actual genius pieces of filmmaking in this and really good shot direction. But then when the surrealism came, I was like, what? I can probably see there was like one piece of surrealism in the beginning of the movie, to where like there was a bunch of elephants charging at a woman who I believe was supposed to symbolize Merrick's mother, in which I guess you can make the case of like being like there's like some surrealist symbolism in there, but
I feel that would have been more appropriate, because at that point you're risking two things. You are not only risking audience understanding, but you're also risking pacing.
Yes.
That's the problem here. You have to understand why you're putting stuff into the movie, and I feel David Lynch just kind of got it in his head that I need to put surrealist in my movie.
Yeah.
Surrealist visuals. In which case, if you're going to do something like that, either really commit to it. Do something like Man with a Movie Camera or Brazil, where like you really commit to the idea of that. Or do it in a very particular section. Don't bookmark it throughout the movie. Because he does that. A lot of the movies are kind of bookended with these little surrealist scenes. You'll have a very real scene, followed by a surrealist scene, and right back to the normal movie. Like, that happens a lot. You're not doing anything that's like... Because there's movies that do that correctly. There's, like, a couple of dream sequences. That's, like, a fine place to put into a movie as long as you do it properly. There's also ways of doing it, like the beginning and the end. There's movies that do that absolutely fantastically, leading with a great surrealist opening or a great surrealist ending.
Yeah.
There's great purpose for doing that, but you have to understand, if you're putting in the middle of the movie, you're not only going to be sacrificing understanding, you're also going to be sacrificing pacing unless you do it correctly.
Yeah. I really have a hard time judging surrealism because I haven't seen too much on that.
I feel very passionate about it because I've seen a lot of it.
Yeah. You're passionate on the surrealism part, like how I am passionate on the whole historiography aspect of it. So, overall, yeah. I think it does pretty well with its historiography, for at least on my perspective on that, while you think it fails, at least it falls short numerous amounts of times on the surrealism aspect.
Yes, it sacrifices too much for its game.
Yeah. But however, overall, if there is anything else, Bryce, is there anything else you want to mention?
Not right now.
Okay.
I will have something in a second, because I believe I know where you're about to go.
I'm not really sure where I'm going to go on.
Oh, in which case, we're going to talk about the rating of the movie.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. I was like, I really don't know if there really is anything else, because I know we were talking about David Lynch, and I thought, okay, I guess we can wrap this up.
Yeah, in which case, I have something for after the rating of the movie.
Okay. So overall, what shall we rate this movie?
I honestly ranked this about the same as Firefly.
Yeah, I said the same thing as well. I gave it an 8 out of 10 because I thought that's a good solid compromise. It has a large amount of ups where the highs are really high, but then when the lows they're like they don't destroy it for me nearly as bad, but it's like it doesn't really mesh well with the rest of the movie.
Just to give you like an idea, this movie is primarily highs with sprinkles in of lows. So presuming those lows, those are like 4s or 5s out of 10s.
Yeah.
Sprinkling those in, average altogether, we're getting about an 8 still.
Yeah. Yeah, that's about right for me. So, yeah. What was it that you wanted to mention, Bryce?
In which case, what I want to mention now is we used an algorithm to generate both these movies for us.
Yeah.
How well do we think the algorithm did?
Well, let's see. Since my movie was had an animated movie, I just thought out of all the many different live action ones, I just thought it was funny. I was like, oh yeah, I did have animated ones in there, but I thought, okay, yeah, that's about right. I wouldn't say it would be a movie that I would ever want to put in my top 20, let alone top 50, but I still have a large amount of respect for it. So, yeah, good job, algorithm. You actually did something right.
This is definitely a movie that I find very interesting. I don't think it would make my list either, but it's definitely a movie that got my interest.
Yeah.
I feel the algorithm did a good job of picking interesting movies for us, but it didn't pick movies that I feel are
representative of what you would want.
Yeah, it didn't represent what we wanted, but it definitely represented our interests, which is very fascinating.
Yes.
So
now the major question overall is, since we have our top 50 list discussed in the last episode, as well as the 2 edited down videos with clips of the movies that were in our top 50, my wonder is, what would the algorithm say with the updated list?
I was not prepared for this. I was going to do it next week.
Oh my god. Well, fantastic. So, overall, yeah, we think the algorithm did a good job. However, we have our top 50 movies to get through now.
Yes.
So pretty much, going forward, we are going to be watching a bunch of movies in our top 50s, respectively. However, every now and then, we'll have little special episodes sprinkled around here and there.
Yes.
Like episode 10, 15, and so on.
Yeah, I believe I scheduled it for every 5 episodes we have a specialty.
Yeah.
So we got 4 episodes of normal stuff, and on the 5th, so if you want to basically look for a 0 or a 5 at the end of our episodes, Most likely the specialty. I think we only have one or two that's like, I think I gave like episode 65. It's not a specialty one. Like
Episode 69 will definitely be a special episode.
Oh, presumably.
It will definitely, but I don't know what the movie will be though. But overall, yes. So pretty much
Episode 420 will be like White Castle, Harold and Kumar.
Literally your high.
Chong.
Oh my god! Literally your high stoner movies. That's definitely on there. However, yeah, we will have those. The special episodes, they're mostly either movies of, like, say, directors that we really appreciate, or little small projects that one of us wanted to do. I know Spider-Man was one of them.
Yeah, so I believe, talking about specialties, I believe we have, like, a trilogy that we really wanted to talk about. I believe there's memorial episodes. Like, we gave an awards thing a while back. And we talked about particular awards, and we have specialty episodes basically dedicated to people we awarded. Like, for example, we have one episode that's awarded to Best Director.
Yes.
So
yeah, pretty much, yeah. But we do have, like, those special episodes, like director retrospectives.
Yes.
Maybe some with, like...
We also have comparative movies. For example, we have a few on the list where it's remakes, where it's original versus the remake.
So yeah, like, I know one of them was The Time Machine.
Yeah.
There's one from the 1960s and the one from the early 2000s. It was one that I told Bryce many months ago. I was like, I kind of want to do...
Much longer than that.
Much longer than that, probably, yeah.
You don't want to do that project before we even did the top 20s, so...
Yeah. I think so. Probably, actually, it's about accurate. But, I really wanted to do this whole comparison of the two. I've only seen one of them. I know Bryce has only seen one of them, but I still
No, I saw both of them.
Oh, you have?
Yeah. It's been a long time.
Well, okay then. So
I've seen the Time Machine somewhat more recently, but I've seen the remake of the Time Machine like much longer ago.
Yeah, I always seen like the Time Machine on a VHS that my grandmother had. Never saw it though, but hopefully very soon I'll be able to watch it. Well, whenever we get to the episode. But yes, speaking of which of special episodes, our next episode is a special episode. We gotta finish watching the damn movies.
I believe we're halfway through.
We're halfway through. We're watching Star Wars, if you don't remember.
Yes, so if you guys are keeping track, we are watching A New Hope, Empire Strikes Back, Return of the Emperor, Phantom Menace, I can't remember the names of the prequels.
Attack of the Clones.
No, Attack of the Clones is not one.
I thought it was...
That's the animated one, we're not watching that.
I could have okay, you know what, whatever. Look, the point is, original trilogy, sequel trilogy, prequel trilogy,
yes,
all of it.
We're watching the numbered ones. We're not watching Rogue One or Attack of the Clones or
9 of them.
or Solo. We're just watching the original numbered series. In which case, before this, you hadn't seen them.
True. So far, we've only gotten through the original trilogy, and we finished episode 1 a few months back.
In which case, so you seen none of them.
Yes.
And I'd seen all but one of them. In which case, it was the last one of the sequel trilogy. I'd seen all of them except for that one.
Yes. Which we found it interesting that how we watched these movies. So we watched the original 3, not talking to each other, and then we're watching the prequel trilogy talking to each other. And literally the first episode of the prequels, I was asking Bryce, why are we doing this?
We'll save that for next episode.
Yeah, so. We'll save it for next episode.
In which case, if you're someone who wants to watch along, you can watch as much of the Star Wars as you're really wanting to watch, as much as you're comfortable watching.
Have a bottle of alcohol with you.
I would recommend primarily watching the original series. The other two,
we are not.
You don't have to.
We're not touching the other random ones, like the Disney ones that they released.
We're not watching Rogue One or Solo, as I said. So.
I'm not interested at all. I'm barely even interested in doing that episode. Like doing the movies already. I'm barely interested in doing it. But you know what? I might as well say that it'll be a little bit of preemptive vengeance because of one of the movies that I have for the special episodes. I will hint at it many episodes down the line because this project that I have is going to take a while. So, yeah. You have anything else to say, Bryce, before we conclude?
Screw you.
Thank you, everybody, for watching, and please stay safe, and screw Bryce.